I'd been dreaming of that island for months. A private retreat, just the three of us, me, Mark, and Sophie, on a speck of paradise in the Caribbean, far from the chaos of our unraveling lives. I'd saved every penny from my freelance design gigs, hiding the surprise like a kid stashing candy. That night, the night before we were supposed to leave, I was practically vibrating with excitement, folding swimsuits and double-checking passports on the kitchen counter. It was going to be perfect. A reset. A chance to stitch us back together. Mark sauntered in, his usual swagger dialed up, a glass of bourbon already in hand. He leaned against the fridge, watching me with that half-smirk I used to find charming. "Oh, by the way," he said like he was mentioning the mail, "I sold the package." My hands froze mid-fold, a neon bikini dangling from my fingers. "What?" I managed, my voice a whisper. "Yeah," he went on, taking a sip. "Didn't think you'd actually want to go with us. Seemed like a waste." He shrugged like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. From the living room, Sophie's giggle cut through the air, high-pitched sharp. She sprawled on the couch, phone glowing in her lap, her dark hair spilling over the cushions. "The extra money was worth it, Mom," she said, not even looking up. "We got like double what you paid." Double. The word hit me like a slap. I stood there, staring at them, my husband and my daughter, the two people I'd poured everything into, and felt something crack inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just a deep, hollow ache. They didn't care. They hadn't even asked. All those nights I'd stayed up late, sketching logos to fund this dream, imagining us laughing on a beach, they'd turned it into a punchline. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned, walked to the bedroom, and pulled my old duffel bag from the closet. Mark called after me. "What, you're mad now? Come on, Elena, don't be dramatic." Sophie snorted, muttering something about me being so extra. I ignored them. My hands moved on autopilot, jeans, a sweater, my toothbrush. Essentials. Nothing from the pile of vacation clothes I'd laid out. That dream was dead. "Where are you going?" Mark asked, his voice sharper now, following me to the hall. I zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and grabbed my car keys from the hook. His smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Good. Let him stew." Sophie finally looked up from her phone, frowning. "Mom, seriously?" I didn't answer. I walked past them, out the front door, and into the night. The car engine roared to life, and I drove. No plan, no destination, just away. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Mark, then Sophie, then Mark again. I didn't pick up. I couldn't. If I heard their voices, I might turn back, and I wasn't ready to forgive them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I ended up at a gas station an hour later, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My hands shook as I paid for a coffee I didn't drink. What had just happened? I'd spent 16 years building a life with Mark, through his late nights at the office, his growing distance, his casual dismissals. And Sophie, God, I'd raised her, fought for her, loved her through every tantrum and slammed door. Now she was 16, all attitude and entitlement, and I barely recognized her. When had they stopped being my family and started being this? I got back in the car and kept driving. The highway stretched out, dark and endless, and I let it swallow me. I thought about the island, those pictures I'd poured over online, the white sand, the promise of peace. It wasn't just a vacation. It was my lifeline, my last shot at pulling us back from the edge. And they'd sold it. For what? A quick buck? A laugh at my expense? By midnight, I'd found a cheap motel off the interstate. The clerk barely glanced at me as I handed over cash. No credit cards, no trail. I dropped my bag on the sagging bed and sat there, staring at the peeling wallpaper. My phone had gone quiet, but I knew they'd call again. They always did when they needed something. And that was the worst part. I'd always been the one to fix it, to smooth things over, to make it okay. Not this time. I lay back, the springs creaking under me, and closed my eyes. I didn't know where I was going next, maybe the coast, maybe nowhere, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Not yet. They'd made their choice, and now I'd make mine. Let them enjoy their money, their little victory. I'd find my own way, my own peace. But as I drifted off, a tiny, nagging thought wormed its way in. They'd sold it to someone who'd paid double. Who? And why? I pushed it aside, too tired to care. It didn't matter. It wasn't my problem anymore. Or so I thought. I woke up to the sound of waves. Not the real kind, just a scratchy recording piped through a cheap speaker in the seaside rental I'd stumbled into after driving all night. The place was a step up from the motel, a weathered cottage on a quiet stretch of coast, rented with the last of my cash. I didn't care about the peeling paint or the lumpy mattress. It was mine for now, and that was enough. I'd turned my phone off after the motel. Mark and Sophie's calls had kept coming, a relentless buzz that felt more like mockery than concern. Let them figure it out. I wasn't their fixer anymore. That morning, I walked down to the beach, barefoot on the cool sand, and stood at the water's edge. The horizon stretched out, endless and indifferent, and I let it pull me in. For the first time in years, I didn't have to be anything to anyone. No deadlines, no arguments, no pleading for attention. Just me. Back home, though, things were moving fast, just not the way I'd imagined. I didn't know it then, but Mark and Sophie were already spending their windfall like they'd won the lottery. Mark had strutted into a jewelry store that morning, slapping down cash for a gaudy gold watch that screamed midlife crisis. Sophie, meanwhile, was glued to her phone, ordering a pile of clothes, ripped jeans, a leather jacket, stuff she'd wear once and forget. They laughed about it over takeout that night, sprawled in the living room I'd left behind. "Mom's gonna be so mad when she sees this," Sophie said, snapping a selfie with her haul. Mark grinned, twirling the watch on his wrist. "She'll get over it. Always does." I found out later, piecing it together from the wreckage, but that's jumping ahead. For me, those first days by the coast were a blur of quiet rebellion. I didn't call anyone, didn't check my email. I sketched instead quick, messy drawings of the shoreline, the gulls, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind off them. Every so often, I'd catch myself wondering what they were doing with the money. A new TV? A weekend trip? It didn't matter. I'd meant that island for us, and they'd turned it into their toy. By the third day, I started ignoring the guilt. They didn't deserve it. Mark had been drifting away for years. Late nights at the office turning into weekends, his charm curdling into sarcasm. Sophie had followed his lead, her teenage defiance hardening into something colder. I'd kept telling myself it was a phase, that we'd come back together. The island was supposed to prove it. Instead, it proved me wrong. Meanwhile, back home, the first cracks were showing. Mark had sold the package through some sketchy online marketplace. Quick cash, no questions. The buyer, Vincent, had wired the money fast, too fast, but Mark didn't think twice. He was too busy gloating. That night, though, a black sedan rolled by the house, slow and deliberate. Sophie noticed it first, peering through the blinds. "Weird," she muttered, but Mark waved it off. "Probably lost." Then his phone pinged, a text from a blocked number. Asterisk deals on. "Don't back out." Asterisk, he stared at it, brow furrowing, then tossed the phone aside. "Spam," he said, but his voice wasn't as steady as before. I didn't know any of that yet. I was too busy trying to breathe, to carve out a space where I didn't feel like the fool they'd made me. That afternoon, I sat on the cottage porch with a cup of tea, watching the tide roll in. My phone was still off, but I'd left it charging in the bedroom, a small concession to reality. I wasn't ready to hear their voices. Not Mark's fake apologies or Sophie's whining. They'd call when they needed something, not because they cared. That's how it always worked. Back home, the black car came by again. This time it parked across the street. Sophie saw it from her window, her fingers freezing on her phone. "Dad," she called, her voice tight. Mark lumbered upstairs, peeked out, and swore under his breath. "What the hell?" he muttered. The car didn't move, just sat there, engine off, windows dark. He tried to laugh it off, but Sophie wasn't buying it. "What if it's about the money?" she asked, her bravado slipping. Mark didn't answer. He didn't know. I finished my tea and went inside, locking the door behind me out of habit. The cottage felt small but safe. I flipped through my sketchbook, tracing the lines of a half-finished gull, and let my mind wander. I wondered, just for a second, who'd bought the package. Someone desperate for a getaway? A rich idiot with cash to burn? It didn't matter, I told myself. It was done. But that question stuck with me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. That night, I turned my phone on, just for a minute, just to check. The screen lit up with notifications. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. Mark's voice came through first, annoyed. "Elena, pick up. This is ridiculous." Then Sophie, sharp and petulant. "Mom, where are you? Dad's freaking out." I deleted them all, one by one, until the phone was silent again. Let them freak out. I was done carrying them. But as I lay in bed, the waves looping through that tinny speaker, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Not with me, with them. I didn't know how right I was. I'd started to settle into the rhythm of the coast by the 5th day. The cottage wasn't home, not yet, but it was a refuge, a place where I could breathe without feeling their weight on me. That morning, I sat on the narrow porch with my sketchbook, pencil scratching out the sharp angles of a fishing boat bobbing offshore. The world felt distant, like I'd slipped into a parallel life where Mark and Sophie didn't exist. I liked it that way. I wasn't ready to face them, not after what they'd done. My phone stayed on now, but silent, shoved in a drawer with the volume off. I'd checked it once the night before, out of some nagging itch I couldn't name. The voicemails had shifted, Mark's tone sharper, Sophie's edged with something I couldn't place. "Elena, call me back," he'd snapped in the last one. "This isn't funny." Sophie's was shorter. "Mom, just pick up, okay?" I didn't. I deleted them and went back to sketching, telling myself they'd sort it out. They always did. Back home, though, the cracks were widening. I didn't know it then, but the black car had become a fixture outside the house. It didn't just roll by anymore, it lingered, engine off, a dark shape against the streetlights. Sophie had spotted it again that morning, her fingers trembling as she peeked through the blinds. "Dad, it's still there," she'd said, her voice small. Mark had stormed to the window, his bravado fraying. "Probably kids messing around," he muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. That afternoon it got worse. 2 men showed up at the door, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark jackets that didn't fit the spring heat. Mark answered, keeping the chain on, his hand tight on the knob. "Can I help you?" he asked, forcing a smile. The taller one leaned in, his voice low. "We need to talk about the island." Mark blinked, caught off guard. "What island?" he said, playing dumb. The man didn't smile back. "Don't play games. Vincent sent us." They left after that, but not before Sophie caught the glint of something under the second guy's jacket. A gun, maybe, or just her imagination running wild. She didn't tell Mark. She didn't know how. I found out later from the police reports, but that day I was oblivious, lost in my own quiet rebellion. I walked the beach after lunch, the sand cool under my feet, and let my mind wander. I kept circling back to the package. Who'd bought it, why they'd paid so much. It nagged at me, a loose thread I couldn't cut. But I pushed it down. It wasn't my mess anymore. I'd left it behind with them. By evening, I was back at the cottage, heating up a can of soup on the tiny stove. The simplicity of it felt good. No demands, no expectations. I just sat down to eat when my phone buzzed in the drawer. I ignored it at first, but it kept going, insistent. With a sigh, I pulled it out. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over decline, but something in me caved. I hit play on the voicemail instead. Her voice crackled through, tight and fast. "Mom, something's weird. These guys came to the house. They asked about the island thing. Dad's acting like it's fine, but it's not. Call me back, okay? Please." The line went dead. I sat there, spoon halfway to my mouth, my stomach twisting. Island thing? What did that even mean? For a second, I pictured Mark selling it to some sleazy scam artist, pocketing the cash without a thought. Typical. But Sophie's tone, scared, not just annoyed, stuck with me. Back home, Mark was spiraling. After the men left, he'd locked the doors, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "It's nothing," he told Sophie, but she saw the sweat on his forehead. She didn't buy it. "What if it's the buyer?" she pressed, her voice rising. "What if they want the money back?" Mark snapped at her to drop it, but he couldn't sit still. That night, he dug into the sale, pulled up the marketplace site on his laptop, scrolled through Vincent's profile. It was blank now, wiped clean, except for one detail. A single review, posted hours earlier. Asterisk, "Don't trust this guy. Took my money and ghosted." Asterisk, Mark's gut dropped. He didn't tell Sophie, but she saw his face go pale. I didn't call her back. Not yet. I set the phone down and stared at my soup, suddenly cold. Part of me wanted to rush home, to shake them both and demand answers. But another part, the bigger part, held me back. They'd made their bed. Let them lie in it. Still, that word, island, echoed in my head. What had they gotten into? The next morning, I woke to more missed calls. Mark this time, his voice clipped in the voicemail. "Elena, we need to talk. Something's up. Call me." I didn't. I went back to the beach instead, sketching with a fury I hadn't felt in years. But the peace was gone. Sophie's fear, Mark's edge, they clawed at me, pulling me back to a life I'd tried to leave. That night, the cottage felt too small. I sat on the porch, the dark pressing in, and replayed Sophie's message. Asterisk, "These guys came to the house." Asterisk, "Who? Why?" I told myself it wasn't my problem, that they'd dug their own hole. But as I locked the door and climbed into bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hole was deeper than I'd imagined, and it was starting to swallow them whole. I woke up to the phone buzzing again, a relentless hum that dragged me out of a shallow, restless sleep. The cottage was dark, the faint glow of dawn barely creeping through the blinds. I'd left the phone on the nightstand, too tired to shove it back in the drawer, and now it stared at me, Mark's name flashing insistent. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to care. But after a week of dodging them, something guilt, maybe, or dread, made me grab it and hit play. His voice burst through, ragged and sharp. "Elena, they're here. Help us." "There." The message cut off, a muffled thud in the background, then silence. My heart slammed against my ribs. I sat up, clutching the phone, and played it again, straining to catch every sound. That thud, what was it? A door? Something worse? I couldn't tell. But Mark's panic was real, raw in a way I hadn't heard in years. And Sophie, where was she? I didn't call back. Not right away. I just sat there, the phone trembling in my hands, trying to piece it together. Asterisk, they're here. Asterisk who? The guys Sophie had mentioned? My mind raced back to her voicemail, the island, the men at the house, Mark's fake calm crumbling. What had they done? I'd spent days convincing myself it wasn't my problem, that they'd sold my dream and deserved whatever came next. But that message, it wasn't smug or dismissive. It was a plea. I didn't know what had happened until later, when the police laid it out in cold, clipped words. But that night back home, everything had gone to hell. It started hours before Mark's call, around midnight. Sophie had been in her room, scrolling through her phone, when the lights flickered. She'd ignored it at first, old house, bad wiring, but then she heard the creak of the front door. Not a knock. A push. She'd bolted downstairs, finding Mark in the kitchen, his laptop open, face lit by the screen. "Someone's outside," she'd whispered, her voice shaking. He'd barely looked up. "It's fine," he'd said, but his hands were unsteady as he typed. He'd been digging deeper into Vincent, chasing a hunch that the sale was tied to something shady. Too late, he'd found a forum post, a warning about coded listings on that site, fronts for trafficking deals. The island wasn't a retreat. It was a hub. And the money, a down payment they were never meant to keep. Before he could close the laptop, the door crashed open. 3 men stormed in, masked, armed, moving fast. Sophie screamed, dropping her phone as Mark shoved her behind him. "What do you want?" he'd yelled, his voice cracking. The leader stepped forward, calm and cold. "You took Vincent's money. Where's the rest?" Mark stammered. "I don't know what you're talking about." But they weren't buying it. They thought he was in on it, some low-life middleman who'd double-crossed them. It happened fast. They tore through the house, flipping furniture, smashing glass. Sophie cowered in the corner, sobbing, while Mark tried to talk his way out. "We didn't know, it was just a sale," he'd pleaded. The leader grabbed him by the collar, pressing a gun to his temple. "You don't sell what's ours and walk away." That's when Mark had fumbled for his phone, dialing me as they dragged him toward the door. Sophie lunged after him, but a second man caught her, wrenching her arm. The last thing I'd heard, that thud, was the phone hitting the floor as they hauled them out. Back in the cottage, I didn't know any of that yet. I just had Mark's voice looping in my head, desperate and cut short. I paced the tiny room, my bare feet cold on the floorboards. I wanted to call back, to hear them pick up, to know it was a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something had gone wrong, terribly wrong, and I'd ignored every sign. Sophie's fear, Mark's edge. I'd brushed it off, too hurt to care. Now it was crashing down. I dialed Mark's number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. "Pick up," I muttered, trying Sophie next. Same thing. My chest tightened. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and headed for the car. I didn't know what I'd do, drive home, call the cops, something, but I couldn't sit there anymore. The road stretched out, dark and empty, and I pushed the gas, my mind spinning. What if they were hurt? What if they needed me? I got halfway to the highway before I stopped. Pulled over, hands shaking on the wheel, I played the message again. Asterisk, they're here. Help us. Asterisk, the fear in his voice clawed at me. I'd walked away to save myself, but had I left them to this? I didn't know who they were, but I knew Mark. He'd always been reckless, chasing quick wins without looking twice. And Sophie, she'd followed him, too young to see the cost. Had they sold the package to the wrong people? I didn't sleep that night. I drove back to the cottage, parked, and sat in the dark, replaying every moment since I'd left. The smirk on Mark's face, Sophie's giggle, the money they'd flaunted. It all felt like a trap now, one they'd sprung on themselves. I checked my phone every few minutes, waiting for another call, a text, anything. Nothing came. By morning, I was hollowed out. I didn't know if they were alive or dead, if they'd escaped or been taken. All I had was that last, frantic cry for help, and the sinking realization that I hadn't answered in time. I'd wanted them to feel the sting of my absence. Now I wondered if they'd felt something far worse. I drove home 3 days after Mark's last call, the silence in my phone louder than any scream. The cottage had started to feel like a cage, trapping me with questions I couldn't answer from a distance. I didn't know what I'd find. Part of me hoped they'd be there, sulking over some petty scam gone wrong, ready to blame me for not bailing them out. But another part, the part that kept replaying that thud, knew better. The highway blurred past, my hands tight on the wheel, and every mile closer to home twisted the knot in my gut tighter. The house came into view just after noon, and I knew something was wrong before I even parked. The front door hung ajar, splintered at the frame. Trash bags spilled across the lawn, and the windows stared back, dark and empty. I stepped out, my sneakers crunching on broken glass, and called their names. Mark. Sophie. Nothing. Just the hum of a neighbor's mower down the street, oblivious to the wreckage. Inside, it was worse. The living room looked like a storm had torn through. Couch flipped, TV smashed, papers scattered like confetti. My sketches, the ones I'd left on the coffee table, were shredded, pieces caught under a toppled lamp. I moved through the mess, my breath shallow, searching for something, anything, to tell me they were okay. In the kitchen, I found Mark's laptop, screen cracked but still on, glowing with a frozen page from that marketplace site. Vincent's profile. Blank except for that one damning review. Asterisk took my money and ghosted. Asterisk. Upstairs, Sophie's room was a gut punch. Her new clothes, the ones she'd bragged about, lay in a heap, tags still on. Her phone was gone, but a charger dangled from the outlet, like she'd been yanked away mid-scroll. I sank onto her bed, clutching a torn jacket, and that's when it hit me. They weren't here. They weren't coming back. The police came later that day, after I'd called in a panic. 2 officers, a man and a woman, stood in the wreckage, taking notes as I stammered through what I knew. The island, the sail, the voicemails. The woman, Officer Reyes, was the one who broke it down. "We've seen this before," she said, her voice steady but not soft. "That site's a front. Listings like your retreat. They're coded drops for trafficking networks. Drugs, people, worse. Your husband sold it to the wrong guy." I stared at her, the words sinking in slow and heavy. "Vincent?" I asked. She nodded. "Alias. Probably a broker. They don't take kindly to outsiders pocketing their cash." The man chimed in, flipping his notebook shut. "Neighbors saw a van peel out 5 nights ago. 2 passengers forced in. No plates. We're looking, but..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. 5 nights ago. The night of Mark's call. I'd been pacing the cottage, ignoring the plea in his voice, while they were dragged away. I sat there, numb, as Reyes handed me a card. "If you hear anything, let us know." They left, and I stayed, surrounded by the ruins of a life I'd walked out on. Days bled into weeks. I pieced it together from what they left behind. Mark's laptop, Sophie's texts, scraps of a story too big for them to grasp. He'd sold the package blind, chasing a quick profit, never guessing it was a front. The buyers, Vincent's crew, thought he was part of the game, a loose end to tie up. They'd come for the money, then taken them instead. Dead? Alive? No one knew. The trail was cold, swallowed by shadows I couldn't reach. I sold the house a month later. Couldn't stay in that shell, haunted by their ghosts. The money went into a small place up north, a cabin near a lake where the air was sharp and clean. I packed light, just my clothes, my sketchbook, and one photo. Me, Mark, and Sophie years ago, smiling at a fairground. I kept it on the mantel, a reminder of what we'd been before greed tore us apart. I started over, sketching again, selling my work online. The quiet suited me, but it didn't erase them. Every so often, I'd catch myself staring at the phone, waiting for a call that'd never come. Were they out there, trapped somewhere? Or gone, buried in a ditch I'd never find? The not knowing gnawed at me, a wound that wouldn't close. Looking back, I saw the irony. That island was supposed to save us, bring us closer, mend the cracks. Instead, it destroyed them and set me free. I'd walked away to punish them, to reclaim myself, and it worked, too well. They'd paid the price for their betrayal, and I'd survived it. But survival wasn't peace. It was just quieter. I stood by the lake one evening, the photo in my hand, and let the wind tug at it. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that. I tucked it back in my pocket and walked inside, locking the door behind me. Whatever had happened to them, it was over. I'd made my choice and they'd made theirs. The cost was theirs to bear, and mine to live with. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. What do you think happened to Mark and Sophie? Drop your theories in the comments. I'm dying to hear them. And if you love this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one.